In this video, I will talk about things I learned while building AI agents, so that you can apply these things right away and be faster and more efficient when building your agents. So, the first thing, which is probably the most important thing, is that you use Pydantic. Pydantic basically gives the agent the ability to transform fuzzy outputs, because large language models, they tend to return fuzzy, unstructured output. But in programming, usually this is not what we want. We need the answers to be reliable and consistent. So for that, the perfect solution is using Pydantic. So, how you actually do that? So, for example, let's say you are creating a lead scraper. If you scrape a website, you need this information in a well-structured way, because you want to use this information, for example, to put it into your CMR, like HubSpot. And there you don't want to just put text, you want to put it in a structured way. You want to put telephone numbers, email addresses, decision makers, things like that. So in this case, what you're going to do, let's say we are scraping a website, we define clearly what we expect the LLM to return. So, for example, we do our scraping of the root URL, but usually on the root URL, you don't find right away all the important information you need. So you need to scrape other sub pages of this root URL. For example, the contact page or the impression page. So on the first scrape, you need this information so that on your next scrape you can go to this website. But for now, you only have the root URL. You have like the URLs of like 1,000 companies, but that's it. And you want to extract the most recent information of the website. And especially information valuable for marketing, which is, for example, the email address, company industry, phone number, and the name of the decision maker. So in this case, what we're going to do is we use Pydantic. So we define very clearly the format which we exactly expect. And I'm going to show you how this looks like. So when you run the script, we scrape the root URL. And as we ask the model to return in a very structured way, as well the contact URL and impression URL, we can scrape also these two pages. And the overall output of the LLM is a well-structured JSON. It's not like if you ask ChatGPT to say, okay, create me a list of the biggest cities in Europe. Then ChatGPT usually answers with like, okay, here is your list of the 10 biggest cities in Europe. And then comes the list. But what you actually want, you only want this 10 biggest cities in Europe. You don't want, okay, I will do that for you. Here they are. All of these things you don't need. That's why you use Pydantic. Next thing what I learned is, let's close this again here, is you want to use short prompts. So in this case, I used Crew AI, and another example I used Autogen, and I try to keep my prompts as short as possible. For example, here the only prompt I have is like, find the required website information, you're an expert web scraper, blah blah. Because I provided with the Pydantic model, this is possible. So try to make the task description and the agent description as short as possible. But if you have actually good examples, or if you have good examples, those you can always add. But try to avoid like long stories, unnecessary, redundant information. This is only confusing the model at the end. So, then, if you defined your agents and if you defined your tasks and you don't get the output that you want, because the LMM is not clearly understanding what you want from it, mostly what does not help is to add more and more information. For example, it does not help if you say, I don't want you to do this and this and that and this and do exactly this, blah, blah, blah. And basically you just try to put redundant information like in the description, in the expected output, in the role, in the goal, in the backstory. No, usually the key is to reduce the size of the prompt text you put here. With prompt text, I mean, for example, the role, the goal, the backstory. In Pydantic, it's more like the system message or the description. So usually you get better results by rethinking, restructuring, and making things more clear by rethinking. It's more like by rethinking, restructuring, giving good examples instead of adding more and more, let's say, requirements to your prompt. Then, what always works good, try to use as few as possible agents and tasks. Basically, I would say it's more about fewer agents is better. Tasks you can add more. Which brings me to the next point, which is that you really have to try to... You really need to try to make your tasks sequential. I get the best results with doing these things in a sequential way. So, for example, in CrewAI, you can actually define that. You can just say that the process is sequential. Those frameworks are very powerful if you can put like, the lead scraping is a very good example. It would be very challenging to write a Python script to extract exactly like the impressor URL or the contact URL, because it can be HTML, sometimes it's contact, sometimes it's contact like in the language. For example, if it's in German, can be Kontakt instead of contact. Even German page, they often put contact or like info, or you don't really know where you find these contact URL. So this, for an LLM, is very easy to understand. For an LLM, all of these different variations are very clear to identify. If you do that with code, it's much more tricky. So then this step where this is tricky, you can just solve with an LLM instead of writing lots of code. And here you do it like sequentially. Try, if it's possible, to split a task into 2 steps. Usually I would recommend to do that instead of that the LLM needs to figure out when to do this step. Only if it's like very complex to solve it programmatically, or it's not possible to do it step by step and has to be like decision based, let's say. Yeah. The almost last point I would recommend you to do is that you really try to do loop processes. So I would recommend that you always use the sequential approach. This, at least me, gave me much better results because it's a lot easier to program and a lot easier for the LLM to understand. And the final recommendation I can give you is that you should use if you install things, use pip. There's also, as well like UFAR or other package managers, but those agent frameworks, some don't have, there's like, there are agent frameworks every 2 months, I would say. There's a new agent framework. And usually those are not well established yet in all these package managers environments. So, but everyone puts them at first on pip. So if you use pip, you're very good for developing agent frameworks in a reliable way. Because the most annoying thing that can happen to you is like, you have a well set up project, everything is working well, you want to add one more library, and then it's not working with your package manager. Then you have to kind of roll back, and this can be really a pain. And this happened already a lot to me. So in general, try to use pip. Yeah, that's it for now. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to give me a like and a subscribe, and I see you in the next one. Ciao, ciao.